This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Dutton. Thank you, Mr. Moore, for being here today with us. It's very harrowing what you are sharing with us, incredibly disturbing, but I'd like Canadians to understand exactly what happened here. So the first question I have for you is, can you please explain to the Canadian public what ghost contracting is?
Sure. So ghost contracting is basically a scheme in which a middleman that technically does no work is being added to government contracts without any legal trace. And usually this middleman or the ghost contractor adds significant amount of commission to for their role to be in between, and the money funnels through this entity that they're not legally traceable.
So based upon the testimony that you've shared here today, would GC Strategies fit your definition, the definition you've just given to Canadians as a ghost contractor?
That is correct.
So this company, GC Strategies, which received $11.2 million, in your opinion, is a ghost contractor?
Yes.
Would the other associated companies, Cordix and Dalian, who received a combined total of $4.3 million of Canadian taxpayer money, would you classify that as a ghost contractor, them as ghost contractors?
Well, in particular in Bottler, they were the prime contractors. So I don't have any information whether they're ghost contractors or not, because ghost contractors are untraceable. But Cordix and Dalian essentially hired a ghost contractor. So even though that in our case they may not be the ghost contractor, they are part of this scheme because they particularly worked with a ghost contractor. They could have easily directly worked with us, but they chose to work with a ghost contractor to funnel the funds through this ghost contractor who was GC Strategies.
And how did this ghost contracting affect you both personally?
Well, our identities have been used without our knowledge or consent on a contract that is set aside for Indigenous business. Unfortunately, our work experiences have been forged, and the value of the contract that we were promised was cut. Random deliverables were assigned to the task authorization that was assigned to this project, and it technically ruined our company, because this matter was not something that we could have delegated to someone to investigate. We had to start investigating this matter since January 2021. We had to really operate at the lowest capacity for every other operation of the company and really focus on seeing what's going on and really investigate the matter.
You explained it briefly in your opening statement, but can you please explain again the scope of your project and what you were approached to do, please?
So we initially we were approached by the CBSA through GC Strategies to begin a pilot project that was supposed to be implemented within the CBSA, and right after that pilot, the initiation of that pilot project, we were promised that an enterprise licenses of our software will be purchased for the entire government of Canada, which it was a license per user based basically purchase, and that was the.
And what was that rate, please?
Sorry?
What is the standard rate for this user rate per user?
So our standard pricing for user per year is $60, and GC Strategies suggested that they will be adding another $28 to that initial pricing. So $78 per user per year for 300,000 employees, which was $23 million per year.
So this was the initial offer that GC Strategies made to you?
Yes, and GC Strategies mentioned that this will be purchased right after the pilot, which the CBSA was supposed to be the agency that the pilot would have been implemented.
And was that the final agreement that you came to, that amount for the project which you were supposed to undertake?
Correct.
Okay. So you completed the work.
Alors, vous avez fait les travaux et vous avez été payé. Non, nous n'avons pas été payés. Nous avons fait le travail, mais nous n'avons pas été rémunérés. D'accord. Alors, quel est le processus qui a été suivi après ce travail qui avait été convenu? Bien, au début, pour le projet pilote, nous étions censés recevoir un paiement mensuel. Donc, le projet pilote devait durer 6 mois et GC Strategies a dit qu'on recevrait des paiements mensuels pour le travail. Donc, nous avons commencé le travail. Et avant de commencer les travaux, on nous a présenté cet accord entre GC Strategies et Dalian. Et tout de suite, cela nous a vraiment choqués, mais nous avons continué le travail parce qu'on avait l'impression qu'on pouvait soulever ces enjeux avec l'Agence des services frontaliers. Mais malheureusement, le travail...
Not working.
Sorry about this. The interpreter was on the wrong channel.
Working?
It's now been corrected.
15 seconds. Anyways, do you mind?
Sure. So,
that's good timing.
Sure. So we were supposed to receive monthly payments. We never received monthly payments, and payments have been withheld.
GC Strategies ever expressed that they would take a cut of what you were being reimbursed?
Yes, the cut was supposed to be $50,000 on the pilot, on top of our cost, which was $350. But at the end, we found that they added another $20,000 on their end, and it was 420.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Mr. Moore. Yes, please.
Well, thanks very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Ms. Dutt, Mr. Moore, for being here today, and frankly, for your work that you're doing on behalf of all Canadians, not just the principal work that you set out to do with Bottler, but also the work that you're doing with respect to accountability in government contracting. It's essential, and it's a main function of this committee, so I'm pleased that you've agreed to join us and answer some questions. Do you have any evidence related to identity theft?
Yes, we do.
And are you able to provide that evidence to the committee?
Yes.
Okay, and is it in written form? Is it in printed form?
Well, identity theft is it's a two-step, basically, offense, and by all means, I'm not a lawyer, but it's a two-step offense which includes forgery and using identities to receive benefits.
Okay.
And this is exactly what happened in our case.
Okay. With respect to the criminal code offense of fraud on government, what evidence can you provide with respect to fraudulent resumes or fraudulent billings?
Well, fraud on the government particularly includes individuals who promise or pretend, they claim or pretend to have some sort of influence with the government, and they claim compensation for it. And we have a big record of Mr. Firth and also his associates promising different kinds of influence, promising contracts, promising opening doors and very specific things, and they all request commissions for it.
Sorry, if I quickly might add to that. You already have seen an evidence of this in the Globe and Mail. They published in the article an email from Firth saying FYI. And if you read that email, he says the amount has been cut, but we can recover it from the next one, which is CRA. That's promising a guaranteed contract with the CRA and also promising that you are going to extract funds from one contract for another.
With respect to the email that was published in the Globe and Mail, are you able to provide these supporting documents to this? Are you able to table them to this committee?
Absolutely.
Thank you. With respect to, we'll continue on the list of requests for evidence, forgery, collusion, impersonation. These all speak to criminal code offenses. What evidence can you provide with respect to them?
Well, I think for the CVs, we can give you very quickly our original CVs and then the CVs that were provided to the contracting authority to show that we had inflated experience. That's going to be the quickest one. We also have multiple legal notices that we had sent to the different parties that were involved, demanding that they provide proof of our consent to be named on the contracts, which we have never provided. And through not providing that response, it is evident that does not exist. So that is another proof that our identity was stolen and used for the execution of the task authorization.
And Mr. Chair, just to add to that, for fraudulent billing, so the payments should have not gone through GC Strategies. The email that that was referred to Globe and Mail today from Diane Daly requesting payments to go through GC Strategies, payments should have not gone through GC Strategies. GC Strategies is not named on the contract. And also fraudulent billing, Ritika can talk about her experience. She wasn't working on the CBSA project, but her name appeared on invoices that Corridix submitted to the CBSA and received payments, and we have proof of payments that was made by the CBSA on invoices for someone who was not working on the project, but her name was there.
Can you submit those documents to the committee clerk?
Sure.
Thank you. Christian Firth told you that he was friends and had a relationship with Cameron McDonald. Is that correct?
Correct.
And in reference to Mr. McDonald, did Mr. Firth tell you, and I quote, "I've been with him his whole career in the government," close quote?
Correct.
Were you ever coached or directed to offer praise of Mr. McDonald?
Correct.
And who else did Christian Firth tell you he was friends with and had a relationship with in the government?
Well, Mr. Firth had a very wide network of high-level government executives that he was friends with, and mostly contracting authorities, C-level government executives, assistant. I remember Mr. Firth and one of his associates, they always referred that they break their roles, and Mr. Firth was only dealing with DGs and up to ADMs, and one of his friends was only dealing with all the ADMs and DMs. Other contacts that Mr. Firth actually had those close relationships was I believe a Director General and Acting Chief Information Officer of Transport Canada, another agency that wanted to procure Bottler.
I'm afraid I have to interrupt. That is our time. Mr. Sousa, please, for 5.
During the project, how many people were working on it? Is it just the two of you, or are there more in your shop?
No, there were several people working on the project. I was not working on the project. I was on medical leave, but Amir had a team at Bottler that was working on it that was internal, and we also had several subject matter experts that were external to the project, so the TA would not have been correctly reflected that there were only 2 resources.
And you didn't have a contract with CBSA?
No.
You had no relationship with the government of Canada? Other than doing the work, but you had no contractual relationship with the government of Canada? For this
instance, no. We had a separate contractual relationship with the Department of Justice for a completely different project, but for this specific project, no. We had no...
And this specific project was a pilot?
Yes.
It wasn't ARRIVECAN?
No.
So this is not about ARRIVECAN. Your dispute with your middlemen, I guess, is it DC Strategies? GC Strategies, right? Is the one that you had a contract with?
We had no contracts with any of the parties.
So how were you made aware of the deal or the opportunity?
They spoke with us. They were speaking on behalf of the CBSA. They were communicating on behalf of the CBSA, and the CBSA also verbatim told us that work with GC Strategies.
I'm sorry, you had contact with CBSA?
We did have contact with CBSA.
We didn't have a contract with them?
That is correct.
And GCS. You said they didn't have a contract with CBSA?
They had different contracts with CBSA, but they were not involved in the final contract that was executed that was supposed to be for our work.
And
so who did?
I'm sorry.
Who had the final contract?
So
Dalian and Corridix, sir.
So GC Strategies had contract with the CBSA. So, for example, for ARRIVECAN, I think they tabled a contract, different contracts with the agency, and these are professional contracts that basically someone like GC Strategies use to retain services of professionals. So GC Strategies had contracts, but GC Strategies didn't use their contracts for our pilot. They brought in a different firm by the name of Dalian and Corridix. Right. That firm had a contract with the CBSA that was used for ARRIVECAN.
So who paid you?
So GC Strategies paid us.
And they paid you twice?
Twice.
For the full 350?
No, for 112.
112. So you're still out 238.
Correct.
But that's been your point of contact is GC Strategies, right? That's who's paying you.
No, CBSA should pay us because the work
you don't have an agreement with CBSA.
We don't have an agreement with...
You don't have a contract, right? And they didn't contract you. So it was GC Strategies that provided you the opportunity.
No, it was CBSA because the work was for CBSA.
I understand,
CBSA,
but who approached you?
It was sent on behalf of CBSA.
So the CBSA basically sent Mr. Firth and specifically contracting authority of the CBSA, Mr. Cameron McDonald, specifically stated that you have to work with GC Strategies if you want to work with the CBSA. And he was a contracting authority.
And this was for the pilot now, not ARRIVECAN. This is the pilot scenario.
Well, the pilot went through the same contract as ARRIVECAN. So ARRIVECAN is not is not one contract. ARRIVECAN has been implemented through a series of contracts, and one of those contracts is the same contract that Bottler was executed under.
Did GC and these other individuals use other contractors, subcontractors, to do the work?
Well,
For which instance?
I don't know. I'm trying to understand which instance we're talking about. You're talking about this particular one, which is a pilot. You didn't do anything on ARRIVECAN. You only did this pilot piece, and you're looking for that money to get paid, and you're concerned about nefarious issues that may have taken place. So we're trying to get to the bottom of that.
Sure.
I think sorry, go ahead.
And the RCMP have written saying we're not investigating ARRIVECAN. That's not the issue. They are addressing some of your concerns through another issue, which I presume now is this matter. It's not ARRIVECAN. Is that correct?
I think there's a confusion that this is about a payment. This is about systemic corruption that we've uncovered. And the concerns that we have brought to the government at every level is about systemic corruption. The systemic corruption was reflected in the manner that Bottler's contracting was executed. It was reflected in ways that ARRIVECAN contracting was executed. And that is what is being investigated right now.
So I'm confused. Why did you do the deal? You had an opportunity to approach CBSA, put forward a proposal. Did that not occur?
The CBSA contacted us. We were not the ones that approached the CBSA.
I'm afraid, sorry, Mr. Sousa.
Behalf of the CBSA.
Yeah, I'm afraid that is our time. Thanks, Mr. Mr. Genuis, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm shocked by what I'm hearing today. I never would have expected to hear this kind of testimony at a parliamentary committee in Canada. You, our witnesses, are describing what is a horrific system of systemic corruption in the procurement system, systemic government corruption, and you're presenting a clear timeline and clear evidence to support those incredibly serious allegations. Members of the government are saying this isn't about ARRIVECAN. I think it is about ARRIVECAN, but it is also much bigger than just ARRIVECAN. I wanted to say back what I think was your description of it and get you to confirm that I have this right. You're describing a system in which government contracts go to preferred contractors. They claim to subcontract to others who they claim did the work, and they provide reports on this. But those subcontractors might not be doing the work. They might not know they're being named. They might not even exist in some cases. And then this system allows those initial contractors to overbill taxpayers and cash in big. Is that what's going on here?
In our case, the system encouraged the contractors to actually do this. That is correct.
Wow. To your knowledge, how widespread is this system?
Well, if you look into today's article that Globe and Mail wrote, only the 3 contractors that we're discussing, Bottler and ARRIVECAN, they're the same contractors, $500 million in the past 10 years.
Okay. As you know, I think, but just for the benefit of the public as well, parliamentary committees have significant powers when it comes to requesting information. I think Canadians are looking to us, the Government Operations Committee, the mighty OGGO, as the chair likes to call it, to do all we can to get to the bottom of this. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you what documents we should be requesting as a committee to help us further understand and dig into what's going on. But first, you mentioned the breadth of this. I want to request that the committee ask for all contracts between a government department, agency, or Crown Corporation and GC Strategies, Dalian, or Cortex over the last 8 years. And I'd like us to request those contracts by Tuesday of next week. Is there agreement for that request?
You have 20 seconds, Mr. Jones.
I'd like you to share with us what documents we should be requesting that will provide further support to help us understand this issue.
So I believe all valid proof of valid security clearances of any individual who worked on these contracts, and also consent that individuals who are named on these task authorizations for $500 million, that they actually consent and they're aware that their names are basically used in these TAs. I think that's the bigger issue.
Okay, so is there agreement to request that information?
I believe you're asking for documents that's pertaining to an actual investigation by our CMP. Like, that is actually being done now. Like, there's another investigation underway which pertains not to ARRIVECAN, but to these other matters.
Sousa.
So I presume that's what you're...
Mr. Sousa, that's not a point of order.
Well, no, but...
Okay, I've ruled it's not a point of order, Mr. Sousa.
I just want to clarify.
Thanks. Just we also need to be clear who you're requesting them from.
Right, so that it would be PSPC that would have these documents.
It would be PSPC for the security clearances, and it would be PSPC for both, for security clearances and for consent.
Okay.
And a date?
I'm happy to defer to the 3-week timeline proposed.
Comfortable with that for 3 weeks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, witnesses. And let me start by extending our sorrow to the experience you had, Ms. Dutt, in your previous work as it relates to sexual harassment. And kudos to you for turning that into a success at Butler. So congratulations. Sorry that happened to you. Now, I'm going to go back to the contract that you had through GC Strategies with CBSA. This was a pilot project for an application that deals with sexual harassment at work enabled by AI. Is this true?
Yes, so I would just like to clarify there was no contract, but what it was supposed to be was that the CBSA approached us for a solution that would help individuals who have faced harassment, including sexual harassment, in the workplace. And it was in compliance with Bill C-65.
Okay, so you worked with CBSA, but you got paid through GC Strategy.
That is correct, and we asked not for... Okay.
Fair enough. So had you agreed to be paid through GC Strategies?
No, we emailed the CBSA and asked them to stop all payments and that we would not accept payments from the contractors.
Okay. When was the first payment to you made by GC Strategies?
After we sent the report that we would not like payments from them, that was 2 days later.
What did you do with that payment?
We were told that the money would go down the drain and they couldn't ask for a refund, so we felt like...
No, sorry. So you accepted 2 payments totaling $112,000
yes.
from GC Strategy.
We accepted those payments.
And those 2 payments were how far apart?
They were a month and a half apart, I believe.
They were a month and a half apart. So once you took the first payment, then the second payment came from GC Strategy. That payment was also accepted and processed.
Yes, it was paid late but accepted.
So does that show an intent or acceptance that there is a contract with GC Strategy, at least as a processing agent for this contract with CBSA?
I would not agree with that because this was directed by the CBSA, and we are a small company. We don't have the right to fight back with the CBSA and tell them what they can and cannot do.
So once CBSA reached out to you and said, hey, look, we love your application, we want to do it, and we come and do a pilot and proof of concept, what was the proof of concept supposed to accomplish?
The proof of concept was supposed to establish the solution within the CBSA and help their own individuals. It was supposed to run for 6 months, after which the CBSA would then sell enterprise licenses for Butler's solution to the entire government of Canada.
Great. So did you have modification, or the contract, as you shared with us, is $350,000 for licenses for X number of employees at CBSA?
So we were never even allowed to deploy the solution within the CBSA because the project was cut when we reported misconduct. But for the portion that we did start work on, that was for the configuration of our existing solution.
Okay, great. So there is a solution. It needs to be configured. You partially configured that for you to be able to go through proof of concept. Then you realize misconduct. You inform CBSA. CBSA said, hold on a sec, I'm going to pull this contract out.
Yes, and we fully configured it, actually. We trained it on all the...
You fully configured it,
yes.
Great. But we never got to the point of demo and, implementation and et cetera. So you delivered the fully configured application to CBSA.
So we did demonstrate it to the CBSA, but we did not implement it with CBSA employees.
So during this process of how long this process took? 5 months, 3 months?
It was supposed to take 6 months. It took almost an entire year.
An entire year. Okay, so during an entire year, you were configuring a system, you're rolling out, you're enhancing, if I may say, to the requirement, and then you never got a chance because it got pulled away to be able to actually roll it out.
That's correct. We configured it, but we did not.
The total agreed number is $350,000.
Yes, through a fixed price contract. That should have been a contract.
You also mentioned another 50 and another 20 for a total of 420. Did I misunderstand it, or because we have a stream of 350, 336, 112, another stream of 350, 50, and 20. So can you help me with that?
Absolutely. So when we were approached,
very briefly, please.
Sorry.
Very briefly, please.
Okay, we gave the price of $350,000 for our work. We received a contract back that was not even with us between GCS and Dalian. That would be $336 for Bottler. On top of that $336, they added another 20% as commission. So the value of the contract ended up at $420,000 before tax. That was given to Dalian. And GC Strategies had originally told us that on top of our $350, they wanted to add $50,000 as a commission.
Okay, I'll have another term I'll ask. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It's very evident that everyone in this room should be concerned, including the government, as it's very evident that there is some type of there definitely seems to be some type of systematic problem here at play, and that's absolutely what we have to get to the bottom of within this committee. And in addition to the large amounts, which my colleagues have mentioned, I saw that GC Strategies has contracts, in fact, with more than 20 departments across the government. So there is no way that this is not systematic, and we absolutely have to get to the root of not only what happened there, but where it's happening elsewhere within the government, and that is most definitely with the objective here. Before I move on to my next line of questioning, I just wanted to clarify for a final time your communication with Mr. Ozowski. He said initially he didn't have any meetings with you. Then in the most recent meeting, he retracted that. He stated that he had just the Teams meeting with you. Is that accurate?
So the only meeting that we had with him was the Teams meeting. It was delayed a few times because of the pandemic, but then it took place on Teams, and then we had email communications with him on top of that.
Okay. So in an effort for us to get to the bottom of this, we've asked for the documentation, but we have to get to the who. Who is behind this? Who is behind this within CBSA? Who else might possibly be behind this within the government? So which government officials did you talk to in pursuit of the CBSA contract, just for the pilot itself?
So we were informed by the CBSA that they intended to take this enterprise throughout the government. And in support of that, GC Strategies took us to meetings with various government departments and officials. So I believe you're asking for names.
Please.
There was Philippe Johnston at Transport Canada. There was Mark Briard and Paul Gerard that were at Treasury Board of Canada. There was an individual, I believe his name was Daniel Gaudreau, at the CRA at the time, and then there are some other individuals that I'm not recalling them right now, but I can certainly provide them to you after.
Sure, that would be very helpful. Now, you mentioned that this piece that you were working on was to be used as a pilot and perhaps implemented across other departments as a as a technical solution for C56. Were any other departments indicated to you where it might potentially be used if it went well at CBSA?
So it was supposed to be used by the entire government for Bill C-65, and that's why the CBSA wanted to be the ones. They said that they were the pathfinders. They wanted to get the credit for it. So everybody we spoke with was for the same implementation of that same solution that was being found or being identified as a pathfinder by the CBSA.
Okay, so we have names such as Cameron McDonald. Obviously, Mr. Dewan was here the other day. The then president, Mr. Ozowski, the now president, Ms. O'Gorman. Were there any other officials at CBSA that you communicated with?
Well, Antonio Utano was the one that I sent the report to, and we were told by Mr. Firth that he does a lot of business with Mr. Utano. There was also the individual I named today, which was Diane Daly, that she stepped in after we submitted the report.
And there's there's a list of individuals within the CBSA who were engaged with the Bottler project one way or another. So Mr. McDonald specifically gave us some names. For example, he mentioned that Pierre Lessard has the values and ethics piece of this task authorization, the individual who's now in charge of the investigation of this file within the CBSA. So there's a long list of individuals who were involved in this pilot.
Was there any mention of a minister or communication with a minister as to a ministerial decision for this pilot project?
For this pilot project specifically, no. But for the enterprise licenses that were the bigger licenses for the Government of Canada, yes.
Okay. Who, please?
It was Deputy Minister Chrystia Freeland.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Were you consistently communicating with Mr. Firth? Was he your only non-governmental contact relative to these contracts or to this contract?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. You mentioned that Mr. Firth brought in Mr. McDonald as well as Mr. Briard. Was there any other party who was involved in these conversations, in the middle person conversation?
Well, for the pilot, no, it was just Mr. Firth. But for the bigger enterprise software, yes, it was an individual by the name of Vaughn Brennan, who Mr. Firth stated that he rubs shoulder with every ADM in town, and he was brought in as a consultant.
Okay, as a consultant.
That is our time, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much.
You've identified, confirmed, and provided evidence of systemic government corruption in procurement. This includes ARRIVECAN. It goes beyond ARRIVECAN, though, and it's deeply disturbing and something that our committee must get to the bottom of. I want to ask, to your knowledge, who in elected office or who among government political staff were aware of your concerns, and when and how did they become aware of those concerns?
Are being made on behalf of Canada based on the contracts that are the laws and the regulations that PSPC has. A statement on behalf of Canada is made on behalf of the Minister of Public Services and Procurement. We also know from different ATIPs that there were redactions for the involvement of ministers and ministerial staff, though we cannot speak to who those ministers or ministerial staff were because of the redactions.
But you know there was involvement of ministers and ministerial staff. You don't know who or how because of redactions, but you know they were involved. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I believe Ms. O'Gorman said that she also briefed the Minister of Public Safety, so I'd assume that would be one of the individuals that would have been aware.
Thank you. And did you have any conversations with, did you send emails to, did you seek to notify any ministers, members of Parliament, political staff along the way?
So before we reported the misconduct, I had briefed Minister Miller and Minister Lametti during a press conference on our justice work that we were working on the CBSA project, but we did not involve ministers directly because we were already receiving responses on behalf of Canada, which would indicate that the ministers were providing their response through the use of the term Canada.
Okay, help me understand what that is. You said you spoke to them at a press conference. Just help me understand what that interaction was like and what you had said to the ministers about your concerns.
So it was a press conference in March 2021, I believe, for the announcement of our initiative with the Department of Justice's Legal Aid Directorate for the citizens-facing solution. And before, I believe it was before the press conference began, there was a few minutes, so I was chatting with both ministers, and I had told them, oh, well, we're working on this. We're really excited because we're working on a larger harassment solution beyond just the sexual harassment in the workplaces.
Okay, so just to be clear, you were notifying them of your work on the project, but you weren't at the time advising them of any specific complaint. So, if I understood that right, so are there points along the way in which you provided information about your complaints, your concerns about the systemic corruption issues? At what point? At what point would from which you know they have become aware of this?
So from our own communications directly, when we started submitting reports to PSPC, which was in this summer, starting from May, we started addressing Canada. When we address Canada, that means we're addressing the Minister of PSPC. That's when we started direct communications, but we believe that they had knowledge before this. So based on what Mr. Gorman said, I believe it was in December or January that she told the Minister of Public Safety, and we're not sure, based on the redacted ATIPs, what time, when exactly, but the timeline of that ATIP is around summer and September of 2022. So that was when the redacted minister and ministerial involvement would have been.
Okay, thank you. I would like to request unredacted versions of those ATIPs for this committee. Could you just, for the benefit of the committee and the clerk, describe what those ATIPs were?
Sure. So I can also provide to the clerk the ATIP numbers, so you can ask for the redacted versions, but I believe this one specifically was an ATIP of an ATIP. So I had sent an ATIP to the CBSA asking for records of communications made by the CBSA's Diane Daly outside of a contractual relationship with us. They had refused to release the records because they stated on record that we were actually contractors and those contracts were held. We served the parties with legal notices. They were not able to provide proof of those contracts. And because they didn't release those ATIPs, I ATIP'd that ATIP, and that's how we...
Okay, is that enough information for the clerk to make the document request, or... Sounds like not. Okay, so please
Where are you
provide us.
requesting it from? Are you requesting the emails from Ms.
I'll give you the ATIP numbers, and then you can ask for those unredacted.
We'll have to wait, I think, till we have those ATIP numbers before we make those requests. But if you provide us with the ATIP numbers, we will. I will then seek the agreement of the committee to request the unredacted versions of those ATIPs, and I hope I'll have the support of the committee to work to get to the bottom of that. I finally wanted to just ask quickly. This raises not just corruption concerns, but also significant security concerns for me. If we have ghost contractors, we don't know who they are. You have people talking back and forth about them having dirt on other people. What kind of security concerns does this raise from your perspective about Government of Canada information?
I have to be the wet blanket and say we're out of time again.
Just brief response.
No, we're past time, I'm afraid. Mr. Sousa, you're up, please, for 5.
Guys. Thank you again. So, just to clarify, and I know some of the correspondence, some of the discussions we're having now is about your pilot, and about your work on that pilot. And the work that has been contracted, CBSA through GC Strategies, if I understand you correctly. Why would you why would you do the work without a contract?
We were continuously engaged with the CBSA verbally, asking them to rework the contracting into a clean contract.
Do you have correspondence between you and CBSA?
Yes,
but CBSA didn't contract you.
CBSA told us that they would clean up the contracting after we raised our concerns that the contracting was not properly executed.
This is after you provided the misconduct?
Both before and after.
So you had correspondence with CBSA prior? You had discussions with CBSA directly prior to the misconduct? And you had agreements with them?
We had no agreements with them. We were working with them in pure faith, which they are aware of, and we were in their liaisons were working directly with Bottler.
They weren't working through GC Strategies?
No.
No. So I was the individual who worked with the CBSA. So I was working with the CBSA all this time. So CBSA, the work began as early as November 2020. So I started working with the CBSA. There's no contract. There's nothing. We started working. And as of February 2021, and this is before we submit the misconduct. So the CBSA started we started talking about how the pilot should be implemented, how they shared some non-public data with us about their harassment, and we really was working really well with the CBSA without a contract. And GC Strategies was not involved at any stage.
That makes sense, right? You're doing work on behalf of GC Strategies, who's contracted you out to do this work. And you have to work alongside the client, and the client in this case was CBSA. So you had to continuously work to make that happen. So that makes sense.
That is incorrect.
And did Did they dispute your work?
Well, nobody ever dispute the work, and we were not working on behalf of GC Strategies, just to be clear.
That's what the contract was with.
There was no contract with GC
No.
Strategies.
The CBSA didn't have a contract with you. They had a contract
They
with
did not
GC
have a contract with GC Strategies
We
either
have,
in this matter.
So who do they have a contract with?
Dalian and Cordix.
Yeah, okay, so that was the payment process. That's who
Yes,
the
and our
contract-
identities were stolen in the execution of the TA with Dalian and Cordix.
Did you finish the work?
We did finish the work that was our portion, yes, and we submitted that work to them.
And they didn't process. They didn't use it.
Well, they didn't implement the actual solution, which was the actual work that they were supposed to implement.
When you had these meetings, did the Dalian or GC Strategy, were they involved in these meetings too?
No, they were never involved in anything.
Just you guys. And so you don't know why you would have done this without you just did this on a handshake. You didn't have a contract with
Well,
anybody.
it's more than a handshake because we have a trail of evidence of how we were directed directly by a contracting authority from the CBSA, who has contracting authority. So it's.
So I'm going to get it right. CBSA has contracting authority, and they didn't contract you.
They brought us in to do the work, so the work was.
You said they used GC Strategies to bring you
No,
to
they
the work.
didn't. They used GC Strategies to receive payments from Coradix. So GC Strategies is basically a ghost contractor. They don't exist on any legal documentation, but according to the Diane Daly email that was released today, CBSA insisted that the payment should go through GC Strategies, who they're a ghost. They don't exist.
The contract was Dalian.
Dalian and Coradix.
So we had a contract with them, and they contracted you. But
No,
you
they did
didn't.
not
But you didn't
contract
have a
us.
contract. You didn't do.
No,
you just did it because they asked you to do it.
So essentially, at one out of nowhere, GC Strategies came and said that Dalian and Coradix were brought in as a pass through, and they will be the one who will basically invoice the CBSA.
And this is all about the pilot project.
All about the
Only
pilot
the
project.
pilot. It didn't go on. But yeah, okay. So you weren't involved with ARRIVECAN at all in none of those activities. They were, because they were contracted with CBSA, but you weren't.
But these identities that were stolen were executed through a TA that was used for ARRIVECAN. And there's criminal theft of our identities on a contract with ARRIVECAN.
And it's appropriate to have that investigated, right? And that's what's being done. I presume that's what's being done. It's certainly not about ARRIVECAN, because they're not investigating ARRIVECAN, apparently.
Well,
from what I understand.
ARRIVECAN is just a name. So ARRIVECAN, if you think about it, ARRIVECAN is a trail of contracts and a work that was billed by GC Strategies and other contractors. So we have an application called ARRIVECAN, and contracts in those applications are being investigated. So ARRIVECAN by itself cannot be investigated because it's just a name. Like, no name can be. For example, Bottler can be investigated. Acts with respect to contracting of Bottler or contracting can be investigated. And so when we're looking at any sort of investigation, I assume that the contracts that were engaged in our pilot will be investigated. That's my assumption. And I don't want to.
That is our time, I'm afraid.
Well,
sorry.
I want to circle back to my questions from earlier, and you had listed off a bunch of positions of people that Mr. Firth had said that were part of his friend and relationship network. Are you able to tell me the names of any of those people?
Sure. So I think we had an agreement to table some of those names,
Okay.
but so Mr. Philip Johnston, who was the CIO of Transport Canada, he actually approved the pilot, but the COVID started, so we couldn't start. Mark Brouillard, the CTO of Canada, and there's a long list of other individuals who were engaged with the team.
I would quickly add to that. There is an individual only referred to us by his first name of Todd, who was an associate of Mr. First that worked at PSPC, that he referred to as the person that would be in charge of the entire enterprise rollout of Bottler and would essentially act as the sales agent for that transaction for the entire enterprise rollout.
Okay. And Was Kelly Belanger ever named as one of the people who was part of Mr. Firth's network?
So we had a meeting with Mindoan and several directors general in December of 2019, and Kelly Belanger was present. As we were walking into that meeting, Firth had told us, "Oh, Kelly is one of my, like, I know her really well. She's really good. We work together."
And was she the was Miss Belanger the acting CIO of CBSA later when you sent your whistleblower report?
That is correct.
Okay. You mentioned earlier, and Mr. Jennis asked about this, about how these players had dirt on each other. Can you expand on that? Maybe just take a minute to expand on that. What does that mean?
We don't know exactly what kind of compromising material they have, but I assume when, for example, when a resume is being forged and is submitted as part of a TA, and when a contracting authority signs a task authorization that has a forged resume there, that's something that contracting authority is basically could be used for extortion. On the other end of it, if, let's say, Mr. Firth conducts, engages in similar conduct, so let's say forges a resume and submitted and gets caught, then the contracting authority would have some compromising material on Mr. Firth that then could direct Mr. Firth to do other criminal activities.
Obviously, the prospect of individuals collecting compromat about people who presumably all have government security clearances is concerning in the context of these apps, which have access to Canadians' personal and private, their medical information, particularly in an age where we're dealing with foreign interference by state actors. Surely if the mutually assured destruction, as you described it, could be used with respect to individuals who are engaged in alleged criminality, it could be used by foreign state actors to extract access to or extract the information about Canadians or to gain access to our networks. Would that be fair to say?
That would be very accurate, and an individual who doesn't, an individual who's basically engaged in conduct that is criminal is the perfect target for any sort of foreign interference operation. And when bad actors try to recruit, they won't recruit a normal public servant. They go to someone with authority, someone like a contracting authority, who has access to systems, to information, to data, and then that individual would be the perfect target for to be recruited.
Okay, thanks very much.
Mr. Moore, it seems to be that you are the one who were doing most of the heavy lifting during the pilot configuration, because you were away on personal reasons. Okay, so I'm going to summarize and I'm going to move away because I got to ground this for our team when we go back. So, good relationship with CBSA, partnership that goes way back before the actual start, sometimes in February of 2020. You work well together to configure the system, and understanding during all this time was a contract will be formed with CBSA. That's what you believe. Then you are informed that your contract by a contracting person from CBSA that you're going to now have to go through Dalian. Correct?
That is not correct.
Okay,
GC Strategies was the entity who said that the contract will go through Dalian.
Okay.
Not the CBSA. So CBSA told us you have to work with GC Strategies. And GC Strategies will be the entity who will subcontract our work. So,
okay. So, sorry, let me just make sure I understand. So, all of the first part is true. Then, when it comes to contracting, you were told by CBSA contracting body that you'll be working with GC Strategies. With GC Strategies, then came to you and said, now you're going to be a subcontractor to Dalian.
Well, GC Strategies just came and said that this is how the contract was done,
So
but
this
that is
how-
correct.
yeah,
CBSA
okay.
we were supposed to be the subcontractor of GC Strategies, but then Dalian showed up out of nowhere.
Dalian showed up, and then we know all the numbers, and we know this 20%, etc. So thank you for that. When was the first time that you heard about ARRIVECAN?
About ARRIVECAN, I don't recall exactly.
Okay.
I can actually provide an answer to that. So the app that became ARRIVECAN was something that Firth would regularly speak to. When we were first interacting with him starting from November of 2019, he used it as an example. At the time, it was supposed to replace, those immigration cards
Yes.
for border crossings, and that was eventually then turned into ARRIVECAN with the groundwork that was already complete.
We have the background. So,
Yes.
So you heard of ARRIVECAN not in the form that it is now as one of the projects that CBSA was also working on regarding electronic visa processing from abroad. Okay, so when did you hear about ARRIVECAN that somehow your resumes or some of the hours of resources from your company was charged to? Because that's still I'm very unclear between the relationship with the ARRIVECAN. And because you're saying somehow as part of a TA something happened, and I'm trying to get clarification on that.
I think that's the confusing part for everybody of how ARRIVECAN was actually built and how ARRIVECAN was contracted. So ARRIVECAN was built as part of a series of contracts, right? So these contracts by themselves, they were the work under these contracts were implemented through a document which is called a task authorization.
Yes.
So the same contract that was used for ARRIVECAN was used to pilot Bottler. So the same standing offer, the same supply arrangement between Dalian and Cordix and government was used.
So is it fair to say there was a pool of money available, apparently, by CBSA that contract or that transaction allowed somehow CBSA to be able to be flexible enough to use that TA number to pay for the pilot as well as the ARRIVECAN. But under any circumstances, did any of your times or resumes showed up as part of the jobs for ARRIVECAN?
I think that's something that should be investigated because we don't know whether our names
So
are...
you're not sure on that?
We don't know about that.
Great.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Can you, because of the extensive relationship they have, can you kindly forward all the documents, whether it's email, whether it's text, or whether it's your recollection of what was the conversation with CBSA around your engagement on the pilot to the committee within the agreed timeline that we've had? So you've got an extensive relationship with CBSA, which is all good and is based on trust. And we need to make sure that we establish that as well to be able to follow. So I formally request if you could submit that, and I'm out of time. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Clear on what Mr. Jouari is looking for?
Absolutely, sure.
Wonderful, thanks.
And that would be 3 weeks, I believe, is the time for
Please, and if there's issues, please let the clerk know.
Ms. O'Gorman testified and Mr. Ozowski the other day. Do you have any thoughts or concerns or maybe any comments about their testimony that should be further examined?
Well, I actually have, we both have very serious concern about the testimony that President O'Gorman made 2 days ago. She specifically mentioned that the CBSA is working with the RCMP to obtain Bottler's records. This is to us, this is a very alarming attempt of obstructing justice. CBSA is not entitled, they should not interfere with the RCMP investigation in this matter, and I urge them not to basically interfere in any matter or request any kind of records from the RCMP. I confirmed with the RCMP, and RCMP told me that the CBSA is not going to receive any records with respect to Bottler. that are under criminal investigation unless those records are going to be part of a judicial proceeding. So we are very concerned of the kind of role that the CBSA may play in this investigation.
Well, hopefully the RCMP are listening to today's testimony and they have a change of mind. Do you know where Mr. McDonald is, and do you know if he's had a promotion lately or anything like that?
He received, I believe, a promotion, and he's now the Assistant Deputy Minister of Public Health, and I think he's in charge of the entire COVID task force, I think.
Can you speak a little bit more about your thoughts on that?
Well,
just briefly.
It's difficult to see that people who were openly committing acts that are frauds on government would be rewarded, I would say.
That is well summarized. Thanks very much. Ms. Kusi, we should be able to get in 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you so much. So it should be evident to everyone in this room, as well as Canadians, that there is systematic corruption within this government. It should be absolutely evident after this meeting and your testimony here today. Previous to today, we had identified identity theft, fraudulent forged resumes, contractual theft, fraudulent billing, price fixing, and collusion. And you've given evidence of all of that today, and you're going to provide further evidence, thank you, with the documents that have been requested. We saw that these three companies, which we've referred to, received $80.3 million last year alone. If we're looking at just the ghost contractor that you referred to in the first round, in which we determined the definition of and defined GC strategies of, they received $43.6 million in the last 3 years. Taxpayers were frauded, potentially $43.6 million. They were frauded this huge amount of money. So in my opinion, there is no doubt that there is systematic corruption that exists. But my question to you is, why is this happening after everything you've been through? Why do you think this is happening?
Well, I believe the only reason that ghost contractors exist is to funnel the funds into accounts that are not traceable. That's the only logical reason. It's very difficult to understand how this government contracting work, but what we realized is that it's more difficult to do things the wrong way than actually doing things the right way. The right way is very, very strict, but the way that these contracts are being awarded are completely awarded by design. And you mentioned the figure $43 million. That's what we know. The whole point of having ghost contracts is the amount that we don't know. So we really don't know how these contracts with other vendors that we don't even know yet have been funneled through GC Strategies. We don't know. Maybe GC Strategies received $46 million on paper, but maybe GC Strategies received $10 billion from all different sorts of professional services that we are not aware of because we don't know. He's a ghost. So I think that's the only reason, again, for me is untraceable, basically, use of public funds.
And how do you think that this could possibly be happening in the public service? What would be the incentive for public servants? I was a public servant for close to 15 years. In fact, I was a management officer. I was a procurement officer at Global Affairs. There were very strict guidelines you had to follow for procuring services, for receiving those services, for verifying you received those services, for paying for those services. What would be the incentive for anyone in the government of Canada? Public servants are known, I'd say Canadian public servants are known for being hardworking individuals committed to this country. What on earth would cause a few bad apples to act in this manner, to act this way?
There are actually few bad apples. Public service, as you mentioned, it's absolutely a very tiny faction within our public service. And I believe there are two reasons. One is personal benefit, and second is extortion. If you do something wrong and you have basically something compromising on yourself. And I believe these could be the main two, either extortion or personal benefit. I think personal benefit is something that could be the cause of this.
And how do you think this is happening? How is this happening, that there that there is this lack of oversight that allows these incredible amounts of funds to just go missing from Canadian taxpayers' pockets. How is this happening, do you think? How is this happening?
Well, that's our question too. We really don't know, and it's very difficult to, it's very difficult to believe that this system is designed in a way that this shouldn't happen. Actually, what I'm seeing with all this subcontracting is that the system, unfortunately, is designed for this to happen.
And if I may add to that, the only reason that ghost contractors and contractors like the ones that we were discussing today are able to operate as they do is because they have the support from factions within the government. If they did not exist, I do not believe that we would be seeing such egregious disrespect of taxpayer dollars without that internal protection.
So the government is allowing this ghost contracting to happen?
Yes, that's correct. Factions within the government are allowing this.
Thank you.
So I just want to be clear, as we talk about, CBSA being the one sending Mr. Ferguthor, you have to go through GSC strategies coming from CBSA, that this is department officials, it's not ministerial staff that's directing you. Is that correct?
This is Mr. McDonald, mostly.
Okay. And if I could just go back to my question before we had our time cut off, where does Cordex come in? So again, I understand, Dalia, where does Cordex come into this?
Would you take it?
I can take it. So from what we understand, that when you have contracts, you have both Dalian and Cordex are separate entities, but they also operate in joint venture. And from what we believe, the reason that they operate in joint venture is so that with Dalian's alleged original Aboriginal ownership, they can go after Aboriginal contracts, because now there is more than 51% ownership that is Indigenous or Aboriginal.
Mm-hmm. So Cordex is they're just a partner, and they can come in under that same...
Well, all the work is actually conducted by Cordex. I believe Dalian is just there in name and on the letterhead, but the actual interactions and the day-to-day work and the running of the business is through Cordex. And as I believe that the Globe has verified, they operate out of the same office. They have the same staff.
Okay.
And the invoices were issued by Dalian.
Okay.
So
they're on the letterhead.
They're on the letterhead of Dalian. And my personal resume that I validated that has been forged is on both of their letterhead. So it's Dalian and Cordex letterhead.
Okay. And just I wanted to go back as well to the testimony around emails being hacked and deleted, and kind of the technology that you developed to kind of source that. Can you provide that evidence to us as a committee to kind of prove those allegations?
So we're also currently investigating that, but it was a third-party solution called MailTrack. They are a well-known service provider, and through MailTrack we were able to see that at times that both Mr. Merv and I were together and neither of us were on our phones or laptops or any other devices, we were getting notifications that very sensitive information and emails were being read first by me, but we knew that it was impossible that it was being done by me. So I believe that we would have to involve MailTrack in this investigation. They are an independent company. I'm not sure how that would work out. I think there's a little bit more to figure out on that side, but in principle, yes, we would be willing to share.
And on my end, I have a list of IP addresses that are under my personal investigations, and I can provide them to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it to Mr. Chowley.
Thank you. I'd like to quickly go with about 2 minutes remaining. I'd like to go to the enterprise rollout that you talked about. Now, I'm going to tell you what my understanding is, and you can correct me so we can be on the record. So, Butler was told that the application that the pilot was developed for now can be rolled out across the enterprise through the CBSA, and CBSA would be technically charging $68 per license, of which $40 comes to Butler, and $28 of that will go to GC, that potentially might follow the same convoluted thing that goes to Dalian. And is my understanding right?
Yes and no. So essentially, when we were contacted for a Government of Canada project. So it was the pilot for the CBSA was an ends to, like a means to the final end, which was the enterprise rollout. That was always the goal of the CBSA, to be the pathfinder that rolled out the solution for Bill C-65 to the entire government. Our standard price was $60 per user per year. GC Strategies said he would add 20%, but in fact added a 30% markup to that suggested price. that brings it to $78.
Okay.
The CBSA would then use their own procurement vehicles. I believe they said that they wanted to put out an ACAN, and the reason being that they could add an infinite amount of funds to that ACAN, so that they would then be able to sell that markup, whatever they were going to add on top of $78.
Once you realized that, you felt uncomfortable and saying there's something wrong here, and then you reported it.
Well, we reported a whole range of different activities, but we never even got to that point of the ACAN. But that was one of the concerns, that one of the red flags that we had. So, as Emir mentioned, we went to go get our fingerprints done, and we were asked for a requesting letter. Because we didn't have it, we called Firth, and
No,
when
I
we
realize that. But you were concerned that you're developing an application, and just correct me. Was that $68 that you could?
Our price was $60. GC
Okay.
Strategies wanted to make it $78, and he told us on the phone that Tony Utano has found a vehicle for the CBSA to
Okay.
sell it to the rest of the government.
You were uncomfortable, so you were planning to report this as a wrongdoing as well.
That was one of the issues. We wanted to go to the CBSA and have a direct contract, and we actually had a vehicle that the CBSA could have contracted from Bottler directly at that time.
And save that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Dutt, Mr. Moore, thank you for your very, very valuable time with us. It's greatly appreciated. Colleagues, unless there's anything else, we are adjourned.